the clerk has advised, we do have a quorum. And we will begin the meeting number 9 of the UMA Committee. And pursuant to the motion adopted on Thursday, September the 18th, 2025, the committee is meeting on youth employment in Canada. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders of the House. Members appear in the room or on Zoom. A few points we'll go over. The witnesses appearing electronically have been sound tested and have passed. All members have the choice to participate in the official language of their choice. Please, I'll advise you, make sure those in the room, you have your earpiece on and you're on the appropriate channel for the language you choose. Those appearing virtually, use the icon at the bottom of your surface. Choose the official language of your choice. If there's a breakdown in translation services, please get my attention. We'll suspend while it is being corrected. Those online, use the raised hand icon to get my attention. We'll do that as well. Also, for the benefit of our translators, I would ask that all your devices be put on mute or silence so they do not ring during the meeting. As well, please refrain from tapping the microphone boom. It can cause popping, which can be a problem for our translators. As well, please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking and direct all questions through the chair. We will begin. Today's meeting is two 1-hour sessions. And appearing in the first panel on youth employment today, I would like to welcome as an individual Christopher Warswick, professor. And from Youth Employment Services online, virtually Timothy Lang, President and Chief Executive Officer. Each witness will have 5 minutes to do your presentation. If you're getting over a bit, I'll say thank you, at which time I will expect you to conclude, to wind up your comments quickly. So with that, I would begin with Professor Warswick.
Yes.
Warswick, for 5 minutes or less, please.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for giving me this opportunity to present to the committee and answer any questions that you may have. So, as I see it, the recent increase in youth unemployment in Canada is concerning and is likely due to 1, the recent weakening of the Canadian economy in response to the U.S. tariffs imposed and the threats of new ones, and 2, the recent rapid expansion of the Canadian population, driven mainly by an unprecedented increase in the temporary resident population of younger individuals. One way to think about this, using sort of basic economic supply and demand arguments, the labor supply curve of the lower wage service sector of the Canadian economy shifted out dramatically just prior to the labor demand curve shifting in due to weakening of aggregate demand in Canada. These two effects should each lower wages for this segment of the labor market, and given that these workers are close to the minimum wage, either effect could lead to higher youth unemployment. It is difficult to know how to attribute weight or importance to each of these potential causes. However, the second cause is no doubt important, and certainly the flow of temporary residents in and out of the country is within the federal government's control, so I will focus my comments on this policy area. The expansion of the temporary resident population was due mainly to growth in 3 subcomponents: A, the temporary foreign worker program, B, the international mobility program, and C, the international student population. I've taken some comments from a recent Globe and Mail opinion piece that I wrote on this topic. In response to the original temporary foreign worker program controversy under the Harper government, Pierre Brochu, Till Gross, and I explored the labor market implications of this program in a 2020 article in the Canadian Journal of Economics. In our model, workers exert higher work intensity, resulting in higher productivity, in situations where the wage paid is higher than their next best alternative. For Canadian citizens and permanent residents, the alternative to a Canadian job is likely another job in Canada with a similar wage. In contrast, a temporary foreign worker may much prefer the job in Canada to what they would have in their home country, since a temporary foreign worker is not allowed to move to another job in Canada normally. Consequently, a temporary foreign worker will have higher work intensity and may be prepared to tolerate illegal activities by their employer, such as unsafe work conditions and holding back part of their wages. The TFW program can not only slow wage growth, but may actually cause wages to fall. Employers should anticipate the higher work intensity of temporary foreign workers and offer a lower wage when initially advertising the job to Canadians, because failing to fill the position means they can hire a temporary foreign worker, yielding higher expected profits for the firm. International mobility program and international student programs have similar issues, and so the surge in numbers of all three programs are likely to have hurt the employment prospects of younger Canadians. In contrast, permanent immigration programs do not have these issues, as the rights of permanent immigrants are nearly identical to those of Canadian citizens. Consequently, the Canadian labour market can be expanded through permanent immigration rather than temporary foreign workers. So curtailing or even eliminating the TFW program need not limit the number of foreigners being welcomed to Canada. International students working off campus may be a greater threat to youth employment prospects than temporary foreign workers. The surge in the past 5 years in international student numbers, especially at the college level in Ontario, coupled with relaxed rules on numbers of hours worked, has greatly expanded supply of lower wage service sector workers. Canada needs to go back to stronger restrictions on hours of work off campus to limit the extent to which international students compete with lower wage young workers. International student numbers need to be monitored more closely and ideally limited to post-secondary programs leading to higher earnings, or leading to earnings above the Canadian average after graduation, as these individuals are strong candidates for permanent residency as economic immigrants. We should also consider eliminating the temporary foreign worker program, especially in areas where these workers compete with younger Canadians. It could be replaced with higher permanent immigration. We should also look at the international mobility program to see if there may be components of this suite of visas which should be eliminated or capped. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Warswick, for your time. You're under. We'll now hear from Mr. Lang. You have 5 minutes or less.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, honorable members. Good to be here. As I said, I'm Tim Lang, President and CEO of Youth Employment Services. We serve close to 15,000 youth a year with partners right across Canada. Primarily, our offices are GTA-based and across Ontario, but just a quick aside, happily joining you from Saskatchewan, where I am originally from, Saskatchewan and Winnipeg. And I only mention that because it reminds me of my own father, who served in cabinet for about 11 years in the 60s and 70s. So I just thank you so much for your hard work and dedication. I certainly saw it firsthand as a kid, the sacrifices that you all make. So thank you for your service to Canada. I will mention my father unfortunately left politics due to illness. The voters of Saskatchewan got sick of him. So hopefully that does not befall any of you. But I'm happy to be here today to talk about hopefully real solutions. I mean, there's no silver bullet, but certainly some of the work that we do is a partial solution. I'll just quickly talk about what we do. We are Canada's largest and leading youth employment service provider. We've been around, like I like to joke, when we started, the Toronto Maple Leafs were Stanley Cup champions, so we've been around a long time. But over those 60 years, we've seen everything, the ups and downs of the economy, and we have learned to adapt to ensure that of the tens of thousands of youth that we see, largely youth that are have great barriers to employment, that we can place them into employment. We've got close to 90% success rate. We work with tens of thousands of businesses to give youth a chance. We, through our training programs or our one-on-one counseling, provide them the job-ready skills, but also the life skills. So, letting them know that they're going to get knocked down. You've got to get back up, giving them the resiliency skills and the hope, and then work with businesses all for free to help put them into employment. We've now got cybersecurity programs that are an in-demand area, thanks to, the Ontario government has been great at the trades, and now the federal government's looking at that as well. So important. We've got trades programs. We've got general programs. We've got entrepreneurial programs, mentorship programs, and then a new a significant area of focus has been our area in helping youth with mental health disabilities, and through our workability program, working across the country, helping businesses understand the importance of hiring people with mental health disability. They can be sometimes your longest term employees and actually are a benefit to the organization. So all that to say, we have great impact. Our frontline staff works with youth day in and day out, and it works. The return on investment, the investment in organizations like us and our partners across Canada, for every dollar spent, it returns 3 to the economy. I've always said, Canada is a great nation for a lot of reasons, but 2 of the biggest factors are obviously a strong market economy with businesses that hopefully, create jobs and innovation, but balanced with our social safety net, primarily, of course, our universal health care. But we're the next layer of an important part of that social fabric that keeps us strong and helps those that don't need a handout, but a hand up. So I mention this because what we do works. It is true impact day in, day out. We've got targets we have to hit. And as I tell my team, our targets, even though my background is private sector, a hard driving, results driven environment, I've created that in our organization because we cannot fail. Our targets are actual people. So this is something that works. So part of the, message I wanted to tell you today is the investment works. We need it to continue. But I admit, I'm not going to make any friends here with people in the sector, but it is disappointing when I see sometimes hundreds of millions spent on organizations that do, research and roundtables and fancy glossy output and, data and more data, things that we see every day and know every day. And here we are getting, a very small amount of investment, and we see tens of millions spent on that. So I'm hoping that, and I know all of us in the room there agree that youth employment is important. A Deloitte research lately said that if nothing is done, it could cost the economy up to $18 billion by the 2030s. And if we act, the contrary is true, and it could cost, grow the economy hundreds of thousands of jobs. So I'm hoping that increasingly we not look at giving valuable, scarce resources to organizations that do more research, but instead do it to what I call impact organizations like ours that actually have an impact and it's proven. And you've got to look closely because a lot of organizations say, oh, we've got impact, but is it trickle down? Is it through research, through consulting, through roundtables? So I think there's no silver bullet, of course, but certainly we are part of the social fabric that really can help improve youth unemployment because we've seen it work. We do it day in and day out. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lang. I assume your father was Otto Lang?
Correct. Yeah, he's not 93. I've got a cabinet picture on the wall, and everyone's dead except Jean Chrétien, my dad.
They're the same age. They're the same age. Thank you for your comments. We'll begin the first round of questioning, which is 6 minutes, with Madame Falk for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to both of our witnesses for being here and sharing your experience and knowledge with our committee. I will begin with Mr. Worswick. So my first question, how does Canada's current immigration policy impact the labor market for young people? So particularly when it comes to those early entry jobs.
Well, if you define the immigration program broadly to include the temporary migration program, then as I argued in my opening statement, I do think that there are concerns that we have admitted a large numbers of temporary residents under different categories, including the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, International Mobility Program, and International Student Program, who all have, to differing degrees, the capacity to work for income. And so all these people typically are quite similar in age to young Canadians. And so it's reasonable to think that they're competing for similar types of jobs. Now, I'm not saying every temporary foreign worker competes directly with young Canadians, but I think there's a lot of overlap there. That's why I stressed in my comments about the international students, because I think international students tend to be near campus in cities where a lot of young Canadians are on average. And so I am concerned that, this is, putting downward pressure on wages, and in cases where the jobs are close to minimum wage, it may be creating youth unemployment.
Okay, so beyond the labor market,
Okay.
if we talk beyond the labor market, what broader impacts do you see stemming from the current immigration levels?
I mean, the labor market's the obvious place. I mean, I guess housing could be an issue. I don't consider myself an expert on housing economics, but, we need, whatever population growth we have, we need to have growth in dwellings to match that. And my sense is that hasn't kept up. Large population growth requires that our public health system expand proportionally, and I'm doubtful that that's happened. I've seen numbers to indicate that that hasn't happened. So those sort of what I would call regulated parts of the labor market be where I would be most concerned. I think you can expand economies with immigration. You can do it in a way that wages do not need to fall. It's not a guarantee, but if immigration or temporary migration is concentrated in particular segments of the labor market, you can see negative outcomes there, even if you're not seeing average effects. So it comes down to, in the labor market setting, are the immigrants or temporary migrants, are they substitutable in production with the people you're concerned about, in this case, younger Canadians?
Well, I know something that I have heard over and over so far in this committee is this isn't siloed. So it seems like the government, just through their questioning, is led to believe that our labor impact is siloed and not affecting these other facets. I mean, people need a house to live in. I mean, when you look at health, I mean, you need good health to be able to work. We also have mental health. So there's these wraparound services that also need to be available and accessible. And so I guess that's where my question's coming from. Like, how much of this is affecting these other areas that then, it doesn't matter if you are a temporary worker here, you're still having access to health services and et cetera, and so are Canadians, right? So how much of that is impacting other things and, and making the ripple effect?
Well, they must be connected. I haven't seen quantitative studies to say how important they are. But I think, I think what we're seeing with international students, what we saw is, a lot of people, many people living in small dwellings, right? And that, even if that, you say, well, that's the international students, they're choosing that perhaps out of necessity, that's still going to have an impact on that part of the housing market. I think for some temporary foreign workers, they probably alleviate healthcare shortages. Like I'm thinking of nurses' assistants, PSWs. But it's very hard to get doctors accredited in Canada if they're foreign trained. So it's very hard to see how, that part of the healthcare system isn't under strain because of the population growth. So, I mean, I don't think this isn't meant to be a negative statement about immigration. It's more that if you have high levels of immigration, you need to have all sectors of the economy growing, and highly regulated sectors haven't been growing. And also, I think that there's a temporary permanent issue that we tend to gloss over in Canada, and I think we should be looking at permanent immigration because those workers will have more rights, they can move to whatever best job is for them, and that's what we did, prior to 2000 almost exclusively in Canada.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lang, thank you for your opening remarks. How important is it for young people to have access to an entry-level jobs as a stepping stone to their career development or goals?
Yeah, critically important. The Deloitte research that I quoted, they also showed that there's a term that they call scarring. And when young people are unemployed for long periods of time, the evidence shows it affects them the rest of their lives. And by the time they're 40, they can earn as much as 20% less employment. So that's a GDP issue. But also we know employment's a social determinant of health. So that all kind of winds into that as well. So it's really critical that we act and do all we can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fonk. Madame Coutrax, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us here today, and thank you for the work that you do to support Canadian youth. My first question will be to Professor Worswick. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. You said in your opening remarks that the two biggest issues that you see leading to youth unemployment, the current situation, number one being the weakening of Canadian economy due to the uncertainty in the U.S. tariffs and everything that it comes with that, and the rapid expansion of the Canadian population. And you go on to mention the TFWP, the Temporary Foreign Workers Program, the international students, and the temporary foreign worker mobility. You also said that the greater threat of those three is the international students. In November 2024, the federal government did reduce the number of hours that international students are able to work, but also the level that is coming in. Have you seen an impact on youth employment due to that change since then?
Well, the short answer is I have not, but I have not seen research on it, to be fair. And also, the timing would be difficult to disentangle because the economy is slowing at the same time. I think those were good, but to perhaps get at your question more deeply, I think those were good policy changes. I just think more should be done, but the changes you described were a movement in the right direction.
And currently, would you say the biggest threat to youth unemployment, the barriers that it presents, would you say it's the weakening of the Canadian economy due to the U.S. tariffs, or do you still think it's the rapid expansion of the two? Which ones do you believe right now is the bigger barrier?
It's a good question. I'm not sure, to be honest. I put them as pretty equal in my mind.
Thank you. Mr. Lang, thank you for being here and for your testimony. And thank you for the work that you do through YES. I know a little bit about your organization. I try to stay up to date with it, and it's quite the model. And I was just wondering if you can share with us today if there is a particular model of collaboration that you have seen in your work experience that makes a difference, and if you can provide some details what that collaboration looks like and who is involved.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Because we're always trying to get better and progress, we are constantly trying to improve our model. I mean, we've got a great model, but as far as collaboration, part of the key is, of course, collaborating with the tens of thousands of businesses. We work with, large organizations, but a lot of small organizations as well. And we're able to, especially for the small and medium enterprises, able to be almost like a free HR resource that we provide them with talent that is job ready. And then if they've got issues, they can call us and we can either find someone new or work with that person. So certainly collaboration in the market has been so important and has to continue, but also it allows us to hear, what are the new needs, so it allows us to adapt and change. So that collaboration has been critical to our success, and more importantly to the success of allowing us to place, hundreds of thousands of youth into employment, partially because a lot of youth don't know what's out there. So that's why the free resources in every community like ours helps youth when they come, a lot of times distraught, especially lately. We've been seeing more at our doors than in a long time. They're not even aware of what's out there and what's possible. So that's why that collaboration is so important. And then the other thing is, of course, anytime there's more collaboration between organizations across the country, and because we're seen as the leader, we help provide free curriculum or training, especially in mental health lately, because it's on the rise. So, every collaboration and type of collaboration works. And then, of course, finally, the all-important support from government has been fantastic when it's there. We just need it, obviously, to be maintained or increased. And that's why I said it's sometimes disappointed to see tens of millions spent on organizations that do research and so on, where I wish it was more towards the frontline impact, like you had said. And thank you for acknowledging that. And I thank my staff, the frontline staff who work with youth day in and day out.
I'm just wondering if you're familiar with some of the programs that are in place in jurisdictions like Germany and Japan. For instance, we hear that, their youth unemployment numbers are a lot less than we see here in Canada, North America, or elsewhere around the world. I'm just wondering if there's some learnings that we can take away from those two jurisdictions that you may be familiar with and you can share with us here. How can we be doing better when looking at those models?
Yeah, I love the question because I wrote about that exact thing a couple of years ago at the Osgoode Hall Law Journal. I always believe in, even back in my private sector days, why recreate the wheel? We should replicate best practices around the world. It saves our own government or organizations time and money. And Germany, you're absolutely right, is the model. Certainly, starting even in high schools, they have a more advanced apprenticeship program where people can go into the high-paying and great jobs in the trades, or, of course, at the other stream where they're going into an academic career, which is all important as well. As much as STEM has been pushed so much, I'm still a big believer in the all-important critical learning that you learn in any kind of education. But all that to say, you're absolutely right. We should look at places like Germany, where they have, I think, the lowest youth unemployment in the world. And although Canada fares a lot better than a lot of nations, we should always strive to be the best. So, yeah, copying best practices like that would be something that we should definitely endeavor to do.
Merci, Madame Katrakis. Madame.
Thank you, Ms. Katrakis. Ms. Gill, the floor is yours for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, and thank you to our witnesses here today for the food for thought on this extremely important topic. And of course, there's the issue of youth unemployment that's preoccupying. There's a crisis. Of course, there are cycles, but unfortunately, the youth jobless rate is higher than among other segments of the population. Now, with that in mind, there is also the issue of foreign worker programs, such as the temporary foreign worker program. Now, I have a question for you, Professor Warswick. I'm extremely interested. You referred to the research, of course, that you're undertaking, but I'm wondering if you've noted a difference between the urban regions, for example, Toronto, Montreal, and perhaps like suburban areas, for example. For example, yesterday I met with business people who, of course, have a number of employees who are temporary foreign workers, and for them, there's no competition with youth or student workers and those temporary foreign workers for a number of reasons, primarily because oftentimes those young people can't work full-time. It's often overnight, or perhaps they lack the skill set required. And also because, and maybe this is another impact that you maybe have observed, but impacts on non-entry level jobs. For example, there are some jobs that are better paid with better benefits, and they'll be attracted to those kinds of jobs rather than going after perhaps more conventional jobs for youth, like was the case for me about 30 years ago. So I'd just like your thoughts about the temporary foreign workers and youth and students. Thank you very much.
Certainly. Thank you for the question. I think that there are reasons to believe that the impacts of, let's say, removing the temporary foreign worker program are going to impact different sectors of the Canadian economy in different sort of cities versus suburban areas versus rural areas, let's say, for small towns somewhere in between. Like in the absence of a temporary foreign worker program, if a firm advertises a position and is unable to fill it at the advertised wage, one would expect sort of probably three main things could happen. One, they might re-advertise at a higher wage and they might get employees, applicants, I should say, at that higher wage. They might instead say, well, I need to make investments in technology. And then my existing workers are more productive, or it's easier to attract people to these job vacancies. I mean, a third possibility is the company may go bankrupt, right? The company may not be viable at these higher wages. And I think it's in that framework, in that kind of flexible wage framework, you know, there's no maximum wage in Canada, so firms can always advertise at a higher wage if their profitability allows it. But that could vary by types of job and regions and levels of experience. So, for example, I think I don't love the idea of a carve-out for agricultural workers, but there's a possibility that that might be the right thing to do, because farms might just have to raise the wage so much to get these workers doing jobs that are fairly remote geographically and seasonal. So I think that, you know, how this is going to impact different employers if we were to eliminate the temporary foreign worker program depends a lot on that context.
Merci. En fait, j'aime bien le fait.
Well, thank you. I like your analysis because impacts aren't identical everywhere, and sometimes a jobless rate might be more regional in nature, whereas in other regions there's full employment. So you referred to agriculture, and I am also thinking of fisheries right now. For some people, restaurants are a luxury, but for others, it's more of an essential service. And perhaps the same rationale applies to students. And you talked about cities, but also in rural areas where there are school institutions whose very existence depends on having access to foreign students who often end up moving to those regions. And of course, that has a demographic effect as well, because there's oftentimes a greater exodus than vis-a-vis the birth rate, for example. So I'd like your thoughts on that from, for example, graduate research studies, for example.
Sure. I mean, international students, it's a more complicated situation, right? Because while they do work, I mean, it used to be, I remember the days when our students at Carleton University could work a maximum of 10 hours a week, and it had to be on campus. At that time, there were clear benefits to that program, right? The students, the international students pay at the university level remarkable tuition. I mean, I think it's 3, 4, sometimes 5 times as much what a domestic student is. So it is very important to these institutions and arguably to the Canadian economy. The problem is, once you say to the students you can work 25 hours a week off campus, which is a big difference from 10 hours a week on campus it used to be, and you can work as many hours as you want when you're not in the session, in the teaching semester, suddenly you're starting to have a big labor market impact given the number of students involved. And I think it was more of an Ontario problem at the college, private and community college level, to be fair to institutions across the country. I mean, you mentioned commercial fisheries. I think there's an open question there as to whether you would treat those as same as farming. I mean, my preference would be to have very targeted temporary foreign worker programs. Yeah.
Madame Gill. Now, Mr. Jennis for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. Last week, we announced a Conservative Youth Jobs Plan, and one of the pillars of it was fixing immigration. So, Professor Borswick, appreciate hearing your reflections on the immigration policy problems and their impact on youth unemployment. As part of our plan, we also recognized and highlighted some of the differentials between urban and rural areas by promising policies to make it easier for employers to attract employees into more remote areas with workforce housing. And I note in your testimony, you highlighted how immigration policies of the current government have exacerbated unemployment, in particular by bringing newer immigrants to urban centers, in many cases with already high levels of unemployment. And this shows particularly how there's been a misalignment between the immigration policies pursued by the government and the labor market needs. On this issue of the urban-rural distinction, what policy changes do you think could help unemployed people in areas of higher unemployment consider opportunities and take opportunities more easily in areas with lower unemployment, often rural and remote areas.
So you mean people within rural areas move to higher income areas or wage areas? Or, sorry.
People who are living in areas with high unemployment,
Yep.
who might want to consider opportunities in regions of low unemployment because they're having trouble finding work where they are. What kinds of policies do you think can make it easier for people to take some of those opportunities?
I mean, obviously there could be informational barriers. People may not know about opportunities. I mean, it's costly to move, and there's a lot of risk. So there may be scope for government programs to support that type of thing. That could be expensive. So I mean, my view is I'm a little bit of a laissez-faire economist on a lot of these issues. I do support our social safety net. I think we do want to, as the other speakers say, help people up when they're down. But I think whenever we do a program to try to help people move or change, retrain, I think we should be doing pretty rigorous cost-benefit analysis.
Yeah, I agree, and we're not proposing a sort of program to do that. What we're proposing is an incentive to make it easier for employers to attract folks. Can I ask about just kind of your analysis and your dialogue with the government around it? You've done a lot of analysis showing how a suite of immigration policies the government has pursued have contributed to higher youth unemployment. You've spoken and written a lot about this whole area. Does the government have its own analyses that contradicts your analysis? Did they come up with numbers previously to justify the previous policy that are different from your numbers? Or is your sense that they pursued these policies in the absence of that analysis?
I haven't had that kind of dialogue with the government, to be fair. So I haven't seen numbers that suggest this was, I mean, I think that these policies didn't have the negative consequences that I'm sort of arguing that they did. I mean, obviously the previous federal government did change direction on some of the policies, as was already noted. And, I think I have interactions with researchers in IRCC, and I know the government's been concerned about getting the non-permanent population rate down from around 7.2%, if I remember correctly, to under 5%. I would say 5% is historically extremely high. So, we went from an even more extremely high level down.
Sorry, I'm
to
just my clock is ticking. I just want to understand. So have you seen an economic analysis done by them in advance of these policies, though? Is that publicly available? Have they shared it?
No, I have not.
No. Okay. Do you think they've done an economic analysis of this, or?
To my knowledge, not prior to the changes that we saw.
Okay. Just very quickly, you didn't mention the significant growth in inland asylum claimants. Right. Do you see that as contributing to the youth unemployment problem as well? People that often have to wait for years before their claims are adjudicated?
I haven't actually looked at that, but it's a candidate, certainly. Yeah, it's not an ideal situation. I tend to try to focus more on the economic programs, given my expertise, but obviously, everyone needs to work or generate income. So it
has economic implications. Yeah. Thank you.
Madame Fancy for 5 minutes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for both being here today. I'd like to take us a little bit away from the immigration issue right now and look at regulations. So within our platform that we wrote, in our mandate, within our election, we talked about, taking away some of those regulations and silos between provincial governments or from private sector employees. So I'm going to also share my time with my colleague here, Mr. Joseph. But my first question I have for Mr. Lang, thank you very much for being here. I read a little bit about you the other day and your depth and breadth of what you do within the YES program. So looking at that regulation piece, I'd like to know what type of private sector partnerships or collaborations do you feel that we could do as a federal government to help strengthen our ability to connect with youth and employers?
I mean, from my view, with all due respect, I can't think of collaboration between the government and the private sector. I think the better avenue would be allowing organizations like ours to go and do that work, and certainly with more resources or encouragement, to ensure there's greater collaboration at different levels. I mean, certainly we work with all organizations, a lot of entry-level jobs for real barriered youth, but also engineers, people with PhDs. We work with all youth. So there is already, you could say, a system where there is collaboration between the private sector and a not-for-profit, an NGO. So off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that the government could do better other than more resources or encouragement to ensure that happens. But we're always thinking of different ways to drive youth employment, and just even in this last conversation from MP Genius, I know for a fact that there's a friend of mine who runs a manufacturing plant in Calgary, and he said he depends on temporary foreign workers. But as he was speaking, I was thinking, maybe there could be a program where we do encourage young people, if the wages are right, to go and take those jobs. We know that a lot of times they won't, but again, test everything. I mean, we love testing things. If it fails. So that could be another type of collaboration, trying to, because we know in some sectors, manufacturing and certainly agriculture, a lot of youth just will not take those jobs. But maybe we should try to encourage through incentives and relocation and higher wages. But that's as far as collaboration with the private sector, we do it well. I can't think of anything other than what's already in place.
Oh, thank you very much. And you had mentioned in your introduction one thing about $1 putting bang for your buck, I guess is what you had mentioned, versus investment and impact. So I'd like for you to expand a little bit then regarding, what can we as a federal government do with our investments to help gain further impact? And then sorry.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, I'm proud of my organization. I mean, again, maybe coming from the private sector, I run it like, like a small business and entrepreneurial. We know that every dollar saved can go to a youth who might not have enough money to get it to our program. So we try to save money so they can have it for food if they come hungry, or TTC tokens, or transportation or whatnot. So to your point, a very important one, what could the government do? Again, my strong belief is look at the programs that are results oriented, that work and have impact, and hopefully fund them more. I mean, if organizations like ours that are relatively small compared to, certainly in terms of funding from the federal government, very small, just a little bit more funding could go a long way, because we see changed lives daily, day in and day out. So that's why I go back to, again, I know there'll be people in my sector will be annoyed because they do get sometimes tens of millions, 10 times more than us, for research and roundtables, and ministers will come and speak, and it looks impressive. And data, I mean, even on this panel, I saw some past transcripts where someone was saying that youth who are unemployed develop mental health, more higher mental health issues. Well, sorry for being cynical, but obviously, I mean, some of the things are obvious, and we know that firsthand, and we do our own research. But so all that to say, a long-winded way of saying apologize. But yeah, more focus on impact organizations and make sure that there truly is impact. Like, we have targets we have to hit.
Yeah. So accountability and targeting. Thank you so much, Mr.
Exactly.
Lang, and I'd like to share the rest of my time with Mr. Joseph. Oh.
Yes, sir. How are you, Professor Warswick? You've been listening to the interpretation, I believe. Oh, okay.
Oui. Merci, Madame Fancy.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fancy. Ms. Gill, for 2.5 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I'd like to ask a quick question of both Mr. Lang and Professor Warswick. Mr. Lang alluded to the fact that in some job sectors are not as attractive for youth or students. And I can tell you that I drove 1,000 kilometres yesterday. I do this regularly yesterday. And there are a lot of businesses that are looking for employees and can't find them. So I'm wondering, in your mandates, have you noticed any changes in terms of expectations people have of getting a job in the labour market? And
Should I go first? Or? Okay. Thank you for the question. I mean, I think that I think employer expectations probably are shifting. That's my reading of what's happening. I think, you know, I think if I owned a small business and I could hire a 28-year-old person from Mexico who has a family to feed versus an 18-year-old Canadian who's a bit lost and hasn't decided what they want to do, I think I would want to hire the temporary foreign worker. But that's not what the program's really about, right? So the program is supposed to be about filling gaps in the labor market, helping when searches fail.
Je m'excuse. Je voulais pas vous
I'm sorry to cut you off, but I don't have much time left. I was talking about the employees themselves because oftentimes they are available to work, and I have business people that I know that have said that in 4 years they've received 10 CVs from young people from the region. And so what about the expectations of the workers themselves? Maybe for legitimate reasons they decide not to apply for X, Y, or Z job.
Sorry, I misunderstood the question. I mean, I think that jobs with higher wages are more attractive, all things the same. It's obvious, right? But I think we've got a situation where we're reliant on, or where firms are benefiting from international temporary migrants of different types. And so it's hard to know the counterfactual. Like if the wages were higher, would Canadian citizens and landed immigrants who are young take these jobs? I think they would. It's just, in my mind, it's the question is how much higher the wages would have to be.
Madam Gill, Ms. Goodrich for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank both the witnesses for being here today. I'll start with you, Mr. Lang. Would you say that there's a tendency from this Liberal government to spend millions on strategies and roundtables rather than targeting the root cause of these issues?
I've definitely seen, as I said, you know, from ESDC or other departments, investment in organizations like ours, which we greatly appreciate. But certainly the last government did cut funding. I mean, it was said that they didn't cut funding. They were just oversubscribed, and to me that was hard to hear, because that meant, okay, that means you cut funding from organizations like ours and gave it to new organizations. So so that was I think a mistake, because they don't understand that also means not only the cuts, we then have to lay off people, pay severance, pay leases that we don't have programs for. So as I say, I go back to, if programs work and you're reaching your targets, they should be at least maintained or continued. But then, as I said before, yeah, I've seen organizations that get tens of millions and again have these roundtables and fancy websites and 17 executives for every position. I mean, I go back to our organization. We have my VPs wear 3 or 4 hats. IT programs. They do 3 or 4 things, because we know every dollar saved can go and help youth. So I have seen that, and hoping that again through today that everyone, I think we all agree that more should be done for organizations that have real impact. And I think it's important to look at what is real impact. I mean, I go back to the Yes scan, what was it called? What was their name? The
We Charity?
I forgot the We Charity, yeah. And we used to say that they their impact, they counted the whole school as impact when they really just met maybe the student council or volunteer. I mean, so I just use that as the example. So even when you have organizations that they have impact, I think it's important to look closer. Okay, what is your impact? I mean, ours is clear. It's jobs. It's, we get tens of thousands of people. Do we put them into employment, or it's true we include impact as going back to school or into some sort of training? But what is the impact?
So I appreciate that, and I guess it leads into my next question. Do you track the percentage of youth from your internships, placements, mentorship programs, et cetera, that remain with the employer post-program?
We A great question, because and we get it all the time. We, just because of our own resources, track them up to a year. But then beyond that, it's hard. But I mean, usually if they're in employment for a year, we know anecdotally, and because I've met people who have been out, 20 years, and they say, you changed my life, and so on. So we know that the hardest part is really getting their foot in the door. I mean, because sometimes, as you can imagine, I mean, things that we take for granted, if they have, even in their, it's really sad situations, their own home, they might have a parent saying, you're no good, you're a loser. So we have to.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
We have a limited amount of time.
Sure, yeah.
I share your concern. I think it's absolutely shameful that for the last 10 years, we've had a government that's spent tons and tons of money on all kinds of make work projects, scandal. There's so many scandals that have just added up. And then what we are seeing, the result, is youth unemployment crisis. I'm the member of parliament for Fort McMurray Cold Lake. People from all across the country, all across the world have come to Fort McMurray for generations. We've seen no housing starts this year in Fort McMurray because we don't see any growth, because all we see is anti-development policies coming from the government. Do you think that the anti-energy policies from the government are having an impact on youth jobs?
That's probably out of our area of expertise. So yeah, I probably couldn't comment on that.
Liberal anti-energy policies are having an impact on the youth employment in Canada?
I'm not sure I can link it directly to youth employment, but I think it's fair to say that if you're, I think if the energy sector were allowed to grow more quickly, I think it would improve employment generally in Canada.
Well, so I'll lay out a few facts. Fort McMurray has a very young population base. We have a very high percentage of people that work in the energy industry, and therefore there is a high percentage of young people that are working in the energy industry. So when you are doing things to restrict the energy industry from growing, and in fact actively shutting it down, that has to have an impact on youth employment.
Your time is gone. Madame de Rochier pour 5 minutes.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
5 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses in attendance today.
And I'll share, please, if Nathalie, if you can let me know when there's 1 minute left. Okay, parfait. So these are challenging times for Canadians, for our economy, and for young Canadians as well. And I think we are tackling that. We've taken a lot of actions in the last few months. I don't want to spend too much time on that. I just want to go back to something that was said about the analysis or lack of. I think we do publish a labor force survey every month, and the last one was published on October 10. And I do want to go back on the temporary foreign worker, because I'd like to understand something, because it's something that's been brought up by previous witnesses as well. Just to be clear, temporary foreign worker are a last resort. They I think, make up 1% of our labor workforce, right? They are also the last, for an employer, there's a huge administrative burden to getting a temporary foreign worker program, a temporary foreign worker. In addition to having to do the labor market impact assessment, having to prove that they cannot find someone else, having to pay them, in many cases, a premium, having to find a housing for them. I'm trying to understand, what is the business argument for a small business to say, I will go through all of that burden so I can avoid hiring a Canadian worker that is in the country that lives. I'm just trying to understand, really. And if you have that answer, please share that with me, because I'm missing something here. Pour Monsieur Lang.
Mr. Lang, on the first question, but I'll ask my second question right away, and I'd just like to make sure that Mr. Lang has enough time to respond. But I'd like to come back to Ms. Gill's question. We didn't really have much time to dwell on it, but I think it's a crucial one. Have you observed over recent years changes in terms of the jobs that youth are willing to accept, and how they go about entering the labour market?
that lead to a gap to what my colleague said. There are areas where there are positions open, right? And I don't think that just increasing the wage we're paying them is viable for businesses. Otherwise, they would be doing that. So what are the things that have changed in terms of how youth are entering the market, the job market, what kind of jobs they're willing to take? And I'll stop here.
First, or?
Pour moi,
Okay, go ahead.
ça se fait.
Well, as far as I'm concerned,
On n'a pas vu beaucoup.
well, we haven't observed many changes among youth over the years in terms of their approach and their expectations. But the biggest difficulty for us is that a lot of young people aren't aware of what jobs are available in the labour market. And that's why organisations like YES are so important to inform our youth about what's out there and available in the labour market. We often hear that there are businesses that say they're looking for employees.
How can there be young people looking for work, but the organizations can't find people? So that's why the organizations like ours are good for that match.
Gap
But
of
as far as
information, right?
expectations,
Yeah. Okay, maybe just go to Mr. Worswick, because I just want to leave some time for my colleague Nathalie. Just après, monsieur. Go ahead.
Just really quickly, so just in response, so labor force survey is a data set, it's not analysis. I was saying that I had not seen analysis, and if any of you have analysis, I'd be happy to read
Really,
it.
my key question is on the,
Right.
like, why
Why-
would someone go out of their way to pay more and have more administrative burden to hire someone?
Right, because of productivity, right? So the article I mentioned in the document I submitted to the committee cites my co-authored Canadian Journal of Economics article where we looked at the data and we found that temporary foreign workers work longer hours, they're less likely to be laid off, they have lower turnover, presumably because they have to go back to their home country if they quit. And so the firms get higher productivity from a temporary foreign worker. You're right, there are extra costs, but I suspect it's because of higher productivity.
Thank you. Nathalie, vas-y, dépêche-toi.
Time's up.
20 seconds.
5 minutes. Thank you, Madame de Rocher. I'm going to go to Madame Gill for 2.5 minutes to conclude this round. If Madame Gill. Madame Gill? No, that's not. No. Okay, with that, then that.
For chaque party? 1 minute?
What about 1 minute for each party in that case?
Do you agree? Do you agree? We'll start with Madame Gill. We'll do it with that, and then we'll go 1 and then 2, Monsieur Joseph. Madame Gill pour 2 minutes.
So here's what I was wondering, and I'll ask this question of Professor Worswick. You said that you want to see the temporary foreign workers program eliminated, that would be a solution. Do you think that depends on the economies of the various regions, which may in fact disappear? For example, fisheries, restaurants. So wouldn't they just have to shut up shop if they didn't get the employees they need?
I'm more confident talking about restaurants than I am about fisheries. So let me start. Just say on restaurants, my sense is restaurants, you may see turnover of restaurants. Some companies, some restaurants may close, others will open. But I think this idea of trying to keep wages low and fill positions at low wages to keep restaurants working in smaller areas, I think it's ultimately self-defeating. I think if the wages were to rise, I think young people in those regions would be less likely to leave. So my view is I think it would be better to keep the temporary foreign worker program out of the service sector as much as possible. What's unclear to my mind is whether fisheries are the same as agriculture. And I don't feel like I know enough about the fishery sector to know for sure, but I think that's the question in my mind.
Madame? Paul?
Oui, j'aurais juste
Well, I'd simply say that in my riding, I have the county with the lowest wages And yet there are jobs that still have to be filled by temporary foreign workers. So that's more of a comment than a question. So I think we need to think about that level of subtlety, and thank you for raising that, Professor.
We'll now go to Mr. Reynolds for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. My first question, actually, I'm going to pose the question to both of you. Mr. Worswick, if you could answer it first. I'm a Red Seal electrician. I've been in the trades for 20 years. In your research, have you seen a decline of interest in skilled trades among the youth of today?
That's a great question. I haven't noticed a decline, but I think that it would benefit Canada if there were more youth were interested in the trade, the skilled trades in particular. So I'm not sure I have a great answer to your question, but I think it's an important area that we should be encouraging more young people to look at.
Okay. And Mr. Lang, same question?
Yeah, and basically the same response. We've seen an increase in the interest in the trades, which is good, but we believe that there should be an even greater increase. Again, for many generations, unfortunately, it's like you have to be a doctor or a lawyer. We've got to continue the education of young people, and again, replicating in Germany and places like that, that this is a great career that helps build our nation and a great long-term career, as you know.
Yeah. Thank you.
70, or you have 40 seconds, Mr. Reynolds, if you want
40
it.
seconds. Mr. Lang, do you see anything that we could do better to promote the trades among young people and sort of change that stigma?
Yeah, continuing in schools. I mean, the colleges do a good job in their trades programs, but certainly in the high schools to continue to change the mentality. And I know it's sometimes hard in even boards of education, but to encourage that. I mean, in my day, they had shop classes. I think some of those have gone away in some schools. But from a government perspective, I know the Ontario government's done a good job of continuing to try to fund organizations that not only promote that, but hire young people into the trades, and we're one of the recipients. We have a trades program. They are more expensive because some of the trades programs, of course, include obviously all the, the tools and so on, but it's well worth it in the long run. I mean, we can't grow housing if we don't have the tradespeople to do it.
Mr. Reynolds, Monsieur Joseph, pour 2 minutes.
Mr. Joseph, 2 minutes. Yes. By abolishing the temporary foreign workers program, what about the economic sectors of agriculture, processing, food processing, building, that have all stated that they cannot function without those temporary foreign workers? In my riding, a number of businesses, such as CAB's Laboratory, have approached me about the temporary foreign worker program. What alternative would you propose to the temporary foreign workers program? Or would you sacrifice the economy for ideological reasons, sir?
Well, I certainly wouldn't sacrifice the economy for ideological reasons, but I would say that in the absence of a temporary foreign worker program, I would expect, as I've said already, firms would re-advertise at a higher wage rate, and they might attract Canadian citizens or landed immigrants to the jobs, or they might invest in new technology. I mean, the Nobel Prize in economics was awarded last week, I think, and Peter Howitt, esteemed professor at Brown University, who taught at Western University for many years. I mean, their theories were about creative destruction, that new companies come in and they replace old companies. But there are papers in that literature that basically say that if you protect companies that rely on low-wage workers, they will invest less in innovation and new technology, and you'll short-circuit that growth. So these are the concerns I have. The impact for younger, low-wage workers in Canada, Canadian citizens, and landed immigrants, and what are the implications for economic growth for the country?
Monsieur Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. You have 10 seconds left.
Thank you to all. We will suspend briefly. Thank you to the 2 witnesses for appearing this morning. We'll suspend for 2 minutes while we transition to the final panel group. Suspend. could take your seats, we will begin the second hour of today's meeting on youth employment. I would like to welcome the witnesses. Please, I would ask you, you have the option to speak in the official language of your choice, as you're all appearing virtually. Use the globe icon at the bottom of your surface. Choose the official language of your choice. If there is an issue with the interpretation, please use the raised hand icon, and I will suspend while it is being corrected. As well, please direct all questions through I, the chair. Each one of you have a 5-minute opening statement. At 5 minutes or a little over, I will thank you, which is I would like you to wrap up quickly after I thank you so we can get to all our questioners. So with that, I would like to welcome from CEE, Center for Young Black Professionals, Agap Jesse, Executive Director. From the Kiewit Corporation, Ashadia Ricketts. And from Youth Jobs Canada, Joe Hirsch. So we'll begin with the Center for Young Black Professionals, Ms. Jesse. You have 5 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. My name is Agapi Gasessa. I have the honor and the privilege of serving as the Executive Director of C Center for Young Black Professionals, an organization that was founded in 2012 after the Summer of the Gun. And our mission is for us to create an economy where Black youth can become financially prosperous, live high-quality lives, and contribute to the advancement of Canada. We do this work by providing holistic skills training, mental health supports, mentorship, strategic partnerships with both employers and community organizations. We not only focus on the workforce development part by looking at where there are labor gaps in the Canadian market and how we can get Black youth from the back of the unemployment line to the front by looking strategically at where industry needs has the largest labor gaps, and that's where we base our programming off of. And then find employers to support our efforts, including alongside government as well. We have been doing this work for nearly 15 years. We have 3 very distinct approaches. Number 1 is a person-centered approach. So really focusing on young people furthest from the labor market and young people who are able to support. We have full-time social workers who are able to support a young person, not only with their skills training, but also their life stabilization. So we have full-time social workers who work on their food security, their housing security. You know, most of us we have an employer attached to most of our programs, their transportation, how they plan to get to and from work, if they have children, their childcare. So really focusing on the individual themselves and supporting them, not only while they're in our program, but also as they transition into the workforce. We keep our young people on a case management load for 2 years after they've graduated. And the second approach is what we call a trauma-informed approach. By virtue of the demographic that we're serving, young people are coming from all walks of life and are experiencing different levels of trauma. One that we see very often is academic trauma that is experienced in our education systems, and also might be life stabilization at home, et cetera. So we have full-time psychotherapists on staff to support our young people who need the extra mental health supports needed in order to be prepared for the workforce. And the third approach that we take is a culturally relevant approach that we have taken and kind of tweaked over the years that we've been in doing this work that really speaks to the soft skills of a young person. So we believe in experiential learning. So learning things like social capital. What is it? How are you going to create a conversation with young people who with your colleagues at work who outside of the workplace you might not have anything in common with? How do you network? How do you set up your LinkedIn? All of those soft skills that are super critical for this work economy. So we do this work, and we've started in Toronto, and we now have turned into a national organization. We have expanded our reach outside and scaled into other urban centers. So Ottawa, Montreal, Edmonton, and Halifax. We partner with other grassroots and emerging Black-led organizations to support our expansion to be able to see the fruits of our model. In our entire existence, we have an 87% retention rate, which means 87% of the young people who graduate through CEASE programs are working in the industry we train them in 2 years after they've graduated. We've served over 4,500 young people, and we're not only just equipping them for the workforce, but we're also supporting them as individuals to really help them imagine where it is that they would like to contribute to the economy, how they would like to do that. And all of our programs are really centered around a skill that cannot be taken away from them. And then they decide what it is that they'd like to do with that. If they would like to become an entrepreneur, if they'd like to work a 9 to 5, if they would like to take that skill and become a freelancer. It's however they decide that they would like to contribute to the economy is where we would like to see our young people thrive. And we've been able to see 87% of them do so. 70% of the young people that we serve at SEA are on social assistance, and 77% of that 70% have successfully transitioned off of social assistance after joining our programs. So we know that our model works, and our model also needs to be expanded so that we can serve more young people. In June of 2025, which I'm sure these stats are not foreign to any of you, but our unemployment rate for young people sits at a national average of 14.2%, the highest since the pandemic. And Black youth, unfortunately, sit at 24.4% as of last year. And that's more than double the national average. In Ontario, nearly 1 in 4 teenagers in the labor force are unemployed, and some demographic groups face as high as 22%. There are not enough, these are not just statistics, these represent wasted potential and untapped talent pool that we at SEA try and address.
Thank you, Ms. Jessessa. We'll now go to Ms. Ricketts for 5 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about youth employment in Canada, particularly in the skilled trades and construction sector. My name is Shadia Ricketts, and I serve as the head of trade strategy and recruitment at Kiewit Corporation, one of North America's largest construction and engineering companies. Additionally, I serve on the board of directors for the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum, a national nonprofit that brings together industry, labor, educators, and government to strengthen Canada's apprenticeship system. From both points, I see the same reality. The skilled trades offer incredible opportunity, yet too many Canadians are still struggling to access, complete, and thrive in these careers. Skilled trades are vital to Canada's economy, contributing over $150 billion annually to GDP and employing 1.6 million Canadians. With nearly 1 in 5 construction workers retiring by 2030, we must increase youth participation and apprenticeship completion to meet infrastructure and housing goals. Meanwhile, youth unemployment has climbed to 14.6%, its highest level in 15 years. The disconnect is striking. We have the jobs and we have the youth, but the bridge between them remains too weak to overcome persistent barriers. Barriers such as limited early exposure, too few students encounter trades careers in school, underfunded shop programs, and insufficient guidance means many miss out on early engagement, which is crucial for changing perceptions and opening doors. 2, complex apprenticeship systems, varied provincial and territorial regulations coupled with inconsistent certification processes create confusion and discourage completion. A harmonized approach is essential to improve mobility and completion rates. 3, financial and mobility pressures. Apprentices often travel far and pay out of pocket for housing and tools. Limited financial support leads many to drop out before certification. 4, employment insurance gaps. Many apprentices are ineligible for EI during training or face delays in benefits. Financial barriers are the leading cause of program discontinuation. Representation challenges. Women, Indigenous youth, and newcomers remain underrepresented. Many communities lack local training or culturally relevant supports. Removing these barriers is absolutely essential to growing our talent pipeline. Despite these challenges, promising initiatives are emerging across Canada. Mentorship and early outreach programs that introduce trades careers before high school graduation. Industry Indigenous partnerships that embed cultural relevance and local employment pathways. Employer-led retention programs that support apprentices through certification, and federal initiatives such as the Apprenticeship Service Program, which incentivized small employers to hire first-year apprentices, but large employers, those training thousands of apprentices annually, were excluded from this program. To achieve meaningful scale and address national labor shortages, we need inclusive policies that engage all employers, large and small. To build a sustainable, inclusive, and future-ready workforce and to address the barriers outlined above, I respectfully recommend the following actions. First, strengthen early career awareness, invest in modern shop facilities and school industry partnerships, and use real-time labor market data to guide students towards high-demand trades. 2, expand apprenticeship access and incentives. Introduce targeted tax incentives for project developers and major industrial owners who demonstrate a commitment to workforce development by ensuring all contractors meet or exceed federally recognized apprenticeship hiring requirements. Establish targeted tax incentives or funding programs for employers who retain apprentices through to certification completion, reinforcing employer investment in long-term workforce development. Incorporate apprenticeship completion metrics into public procurement and infrastructure contracts, rewarding employers who successfully train and certify apprentices. And continue harmonizing apprenticeship standards across provinces and territories to improve mobility, consistency, and credential recognition nationwide. Third, we need to modernize the employment insurance program. We need to adapt EI eligibility to reflect project-based trades work and guarantee uninterrupted support during training, and pilot models that reimburse employers who maintain wage support for apprentices during training blocks, strengthening retention and reducing dropout rates. 4, we need to reduce the financial and mobility barriers for apprentices. We need to provide targeted supports for travel, housing, and tools to enable apprentices to access training when it is unavailable locally. We need to expand non-repayable grants rather than loans to reduce financial burden, recognizing that debt-based models have not been shown to improve completion outcomes. And 5, we need to grow Canada's skilled trades talent pipeline from underrepresented groups. We need to fund pre-apprenticeship and mentorship and bridging programs for women, Indigenous youth newcomers, and other equity-seeking groups, support Indigenous-led training partnerships that reflect community cultural strengths and regional economic opportunities. The skilled trades offer purpose, pride, and prosperity for young Canadians, but the system must evolve with policies that reflect how apprentices actually live, learn, and work. Canada needs a national apprenticeship strategy co-designed by industry, labor, educators, and government, not in silos, but in partnership. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I welcome your questions.
Ms. Ricketts, now Mr. Hirsch for 5 minutes or less.
Yes, hello, good day, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Joe Hirsch, Managing Director of Youth Jobs Canada. We have been in operation for 8 years. We were founded in 2017. The Youth Jobs Canada mission statement is to bridge the divide in Canada between youth and at-risk youth between ages 15 and 30, and employers by helping provide the building blocks for youth of all diversity with an innovative, integrated, and singular platform offering graduating options to build long-term relationships with employers. The Youth Jobs Canada vision statement to provide a valuable resource in Canada to youth and vulnerable youth and employers in order to improve job-ready skills of at-risk youth by working together in transition opportunities today in order to improve and lower the high youth unemployment rate in Canada tomorrow. At the moment, and since about 2021, we've been working with Canada Job Bank with a feed of jobs that are posted on Canada Job Bank into Youth Jobs Canada. So we're in a somewhat unique position that way, and we value and respect the relationship we've been able to build with Canada Job Bank and ESDC. We also, in our heartfelt best wisdom, had this mission to help truly make a difference to bring down that high youth unemployment rate since 2017, and taking snapshots from year to year. And it's kind of hit a lightning rod this year that, hey, everybody's come to the realization that youth unemployment is still really high. So although, we see some successes with the YES program, we'd sure like to stimulate some further conversation between ESDC and the YES program leadership group to find out how we can better collaborate and work together. We see, there are some contributing factors to why the youth unemployment rate is high. some of the individuals have hit on some of those points that we agree with earlier today. So there are barriers there. There's individuals with disabilities and challenges to integrate into the workforce, and that's undisputed. But in order to try to really come up with a level playing field relative to why organizations may be choosing to look abroad, there has to be more work done to adjust youth expectations. We still see that as a concern, and to increase reliability, to lessen turnover, and also to increase productivity of youth. Those are, undeniable from our standpoint. The major industries that we continue to have employers post roles for, and we've had thousands and thousands of postings over the 8 years that we've been in operation. The top 3 are still restaurant, hospitality, trades and technical, and healthcare. So those seem to be jobs that most traditional employers have a hard time filling. So those typically end up with groups that are looking to try to make inroads into the workforce, and that's fine. So working with ESDC and the YES program, we'd like to see options for resource availability, not just to ourselves, but to other external organizations. It appears that the program for YES funding has had a brief window of funding options available last in 2023, but we'd sure like to recommend that that be looked at again to allow for organizations to apply for funding so that support services can be put into place. We've run quite a successful operation. We're privately funded and we've been quite financially stable. Same can't be necessarily true for other organizations that are trying to make inroads to help solve the challenge. However, we're open to working together with ESDC and the YES program leadership group. We've got 3 recommendations to consider. One is options for solutions in the future for greater and improved integration and collaboration between YES, ESDC, involving the 11 federal departments and 14 federal programs. We see those programs as good, but not necessarily enough. They're great starters to help youth have that work sensation and work experience, but it doesn't necessarily get them into industry because these 14 federal programs are with departments that have jobs internally available. So it doesn't really get them into the market economy. So we'd like to, propose greater working cooperation between the YES program, ESDC, and other organizations, including Youth Jobs Canada. The second recommendation is options to consider incentive programs for employers in Canada for year-round wage subsidy options to stimulate investment in youth employment. We see that as pretty key because that way there's equity from both the market perspective and there's also equity from the social perspective that the federal government is trying to support. The last recommendation we got is how youth employment in the ecosystem that we see could look in the future by modeling and focusing better on connecting the market employer opportunities and the YES program deliverables. So we see that as a
Mr.
gap.
Hirsch. You can continue those comments in questioning. I'm sure you'll get several. We'll begin the questioning round with Mr. Janis for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses. I'll start with Ms. Gassessa. As you mentioned, youth unemployment is very high. It's even higher in the community you serve. And because of that, we need to be especially clear about the importance of evaluating the effectiveness of programs, especially programs that are publicly funded. You talked about the effectiveness of your programs, and thank you for doing that. Those are incredible numbers. Congratulations on the work you're doing and the results you are achieving. And I think those numbers highlight the importance of identifying outcomes. We've also heard testimony that the government has spent money in ways that are, in the views of other witnesses, ineffective towards organizations that do not produce results. Most infamously, we've had mention of the We Charity scandal, but there are other cases, and there doesn't seem to be a systematic evaluation of outputs for spending. And I think you talked about the right outputs, which is, are young people working? Are they working in the fields they were trained in years out from the training programs? It's not enough to say we've hosted X number of conferences or we've trained a certain number of youth. The question isn't whether you've run training programs, but whether those training programs have achieved the objective, which is young people in jobs. I'd appreciate hearing your insights on how we can propose shifting dollars from less effective forms of training and support programs to more effective programs and more effectively align government spending with the desired outputs.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think one of the challenges that C has experienced has been in the call-out process. Although we have very high impact, our team ourselves we're not a very large organization. And so I think part of the issue that we have come across is, the fact that every time we reapply to a grant, it's what's written on the paper and not necessarily the track record of what we've been able to do with the funds prior to. A perfect example of this is YSS, which is a program, I didn't get a chance to finish, but it is a program that we encourage this government to continue to fund and support organizations like ours to receive. But we have been unsuccessful. We've been successful in receiving the funds after a lot of advocacy around the work that we're doing, have exceeded our numbers, much to what I've described. But then when the call out came again, we were unsuccessful. And so it doesn't allow for us to have continuity around it. It also impedes our ability to bring employers on board. The way our model works is really for employers, government, and us as community to come together. But the reality is, corporations are not going to fund the entire program based off of the needs of the young people that we have. The wraparound supports, all of that is really reliant on, foundations and government funding. And then the employers can pay for the pieces that they're benefiting from, which is the actual hard skills and workforce development training. So I think—
Can I just jump in? It sounds like— Sorry, it sounds like you're saying that the applications you're being asked to fill out don't put questions about outputs and results front and center. Is that the case, that they're focused on asking you other questions that are not as oriented towards the actual outputs you produce?
Well, I think the issue, there's opportunity for you to explain what you've done, but I think for organizations like ours that have a very strong track record and do have results, I think that should be accounted for in the evaluation process, and that it's not like a fresh new situation where bureaucrats can't look at your past track record and they can only see what's on the paper, because you can only explain your impact through numbers, of course, but there's a lot more to it outside of numbers that you can't really fit in a 500-word box.
Yeah. It would seem so foundational that we should be focusing on actual outputs in the spending. So thank you for your attention to that. Just briefly in the time I have left, Ms. Ricketts, our party has proposed direct support for high school vocational programs around trades, trying to get young people exposed to these programs as early as possible. I wonder if you could just tell us briefly what you think about that, and also what kind of the state of programs targeted at younger people, high school teenagers, to expose them to the trades.
Yeah, I absolutely support it. It's important, actually, that we expose students as early as, they say, grade 6. And it's because children actually start to think about a career. They start to think about what they want to do when they're older. And, they've typically already have an idea by the time they've hit, the high school era. They have an idea as to where they want to go. And so organizations like, Skills Canada, incredible opportunity, incredible organization, where they actually do expose students to the trades as early as grade 6. I've seen a lot of, there's different books that they will actually read to kids in elementary school that give them exposure to the trades. The issue is that, not a lot of people know about the opportunities that are present in the trades. And, as a parent, I would say that we all want our children to do the best, and we assume that the best is university. But I've met some really incredible trades professionals, and I think that's the idea is that there's a stigma that a trade is not a profession when it is a profession.
9 seconds. Mr. Jones?
Oh,
6 seconds.
Okay, well, thank you for that. How can we remove the stigma? What other steps would you like to see to remove the stigma?
A short answer.
Yeah, short answer. It's exposure to not just the students, but the parents as to what the financial benefit is to a trade and the long-term opportunity for individuals who go into the trades.
Thank you, Ms. Ricketts. Mr. Jonas, Madame de Rochier pour 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr.
6 minutes.
Really, thank you to the speakers. I think you've all brought a lot of very thoughtful engagement on this. I really appreciate the constructive aspect of today's discussion. My question is maybe for all of you. My first question is around, so, we're seeing an increase around the world and in Canada of polarization, whether it's around immigration issue, around the importance of DEI initiatives. And I'm just wondering, you spoke about how Black youth have a higher rate of unemployment, and Ms. Rick Pickett, you talked also about underrepresented groups. So how much you think of that divisive, polarizing language impacts those groups when it comes to finding employment? Whoever wants to start.
I can start if you want. I don't know if it's the polarizing words or anything else. I think it's just when it comes to the trades, traditionally, you would have found a Caucasian male in the trades, and that exposure, I guess it's more unknown, the opportunities that should be presented. I believe that they say Indigenous make up 5% of our trades workforce. Women, I think it's 12% of the construction industry. These are the individuals that we need to reach out to. So I think that we just need to make it more encompassing, make them more aware of the opportunity. And again, remove the stigmas as to what the construction industry is like to work in, and the idea of this traditional role.
Thank you.
From my perspective, I think the conversation around whether DEI should exist, whether it shouldn't, et cetera, I think the numbers, just like folks are all very concerned about the numbers and the success rates, the numbers don't lie. And the numbers are telling us that Black youth are being left behind. So whether we want to call it DEI, whether we want to call it whatever, what needs to happen is something needs to change. So whatever we want to call it, opportunity needs to start knocking on their door. So the conversation is irrelevant if we're not going to move towards actual change. For our organization, it's about access for all Canadians, including Black youth. And right now, if we sit at a 24.5% unemployment rate, that is a problem for Canada to address, not Black youth, not our organization as a whole. And so the conversation can continue, but it needs to then move into some type of action that addresses this very immediate need.
Thank you. Just we've talked a lot about skills, the lack of, youth enrolling in skills trade, and we don't have, and I think that's been a recurring theme of this study over the last few weeks. So would you agree that the government has sent very strong signal with respect to whether it's setting up Build Canada Home, whether it's with setting up the major project office, whether it's the programs that we've launched on skills trade and helping group reskill. So we are sending those signals. So those are important. Those are the jobs we need, right, to rebuild so why is it, are those the right signals to send?
They are, yes. I think the careers, the jobs, the projects are really important, but there's a push and pull, i.e. you can push the information out. You can try to push the youth into the trades, but there has to be a pull factor as well from employers. And that's why I talk about incentives, because there have to be the jobs. You know, it all comes down, it doesn't matter if you're a small employer or a large, there's a budget to meet, there are financial obligations, it's a cost to a project. And so you have to be able to ensure that your employers, that your clients are creating positions for apprentices. Reality is, it is expensive. It's more expensive to hire somebody and train them on a project in an apprenticeship role than just to hire a journeyman in that same position and have them do the work.
Thank you. Mr. Hirsch, I wonder if you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, no, I entirely agree with Ms. Ricketts. The stimulus has to come from the employer level. We can't emphasize that enough. In our recommendations, there's a theme in there. And we see a disconnect, between what's going on with the efforts, not to discredit or undervalue anything that the federal government's invested in terms of skills and experience layers for youth, but it's got to be looked at in an equation. There's skills/experience plus opportunities equals results. It's just that simple. And we've got an incomplete equation going on right now across the country. The employers need to be on board, and in order to get the employers on board to start that employment curve back in high school, in looking at countries that are educated, industrialized countries in Western Europe, they do this. We don't. We need to do a better job of this. So in short form, there's a disconnect that we see, and we need to work on closing that gap between what's going on in the free market economy, what employers need, and look at this as an equity and investment from both the stakeholders on the market side and the social side being supported by the federal government. And I think once we start to change that philosophy to be a little bit more holistic, I think we're going to start seeing real results.
Thank you.
And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Hirsch. Madame de Rocher. Madame Gill pour 6 minutes.
Ms. Gill for 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, and thanks again to all of our witnesses who are shedding light on these issues today. It's food for thought and helps us in our study. A question first for Ms. Gassessa concerning the experience that you've had with Black youth. What are the primary obstacles that they have to face? You cited an impressive figure, that jobless rate of about 24%. So the obstacles and the solutions, we need recommendations with a view to helping these young people. So if you could please offer your input.
Yeah, of course. Well, I think number one, we can't just offer skills development. I think this also has to come with wraparound supports. So really paying attention to the life stabilization of a young person, because anybody, even if they do find a job, if their mental health is not where it needs to be, if they are experiencing housing insecurity, food insecurity, then it'll be very difficult for them to show up for their job as their best self. So there's that, number one. Number two, I think that government can play a much better role in coordinating with nonprofits like ourselves. So government, corporations, and there needs to be a bit more, not a bit more, there needs to be a significant collaboration and using government as a connector, because most of the time what we're doing is we're looking at the labor gaps, we're doing a study, we're figuring out where there's labor gaps and we're also looking at where government is putting their money. So I'll use an example, critical minerals. That's somewhere that government has highly been talking about, been investing money in that industry. And so there's going to be jobs there. And so we then developed a program. But there seems to be a disconnect on what we're seeing and then where government sees value in an organization like ours, creating an opportunity for that to happen. And we're following where we're seeing labor gaps. That doesn't necessarily always mean that employers are going to be flocking to us just because we're doing that. And like I said, we're we're a charity, we don't have as much of a long reach or the resources. And so if government is investing in industry, then also initiating those relationships with community organizations to collaborate better would be a huge help, because we are looking at where government is putting their money. We're looking at where the labor trends are. We have the young people, we have their readiness. The reality also is that there needs to be an assist in getting to industry. So that's one thing. The other thing I would also say is in a lot of the industries that we're doing work in, these are very foreign to our communities. Ms. Ricketts had spoken about this. So if we're talking about critical minerals, for instance, when we decided that we wanted to go into that industry, we then had to run an exploratory program so that people could actually understand, like, what is critical minerals? What are the types of jobs that you can have, so that we can then see the interests of the young people and narrow down where exactly we would be running the skills trade part of the program. So I think access and understanding what opportunities are out there, because our young people, of course, in their schools are exploring this, but we run an entertainment trades program. People understanding that you can have trades in the entertainment industry, that there's carpenters, electricians, set designers, all of those folks are also needed in the entertainment industry. That was something that was new to the young people that we're serving. And that's one of we have 125 applicants for 15 spots so I think exposure and the ability to have access to employers that are actually doing this work, because it's not as easy as just following where the labor gaps are, because industry all needs encouragement to also engage with not-for-profit organizations as well.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Gesese. Let's change tack now. You mentioned to access and understanding. Sometimes we think of EI when it comes to the jobless rate, but Ms. Ricketts mentioned, I think that you referred to a number of possible solutions in terms of tweaking the employment insurance system, because there are a lot of youth that are accessing EI, and oftentimes they don't have enough money to sign up for vocational training. So what are some solutions, Ms. Ricketts, in order to better support our youth who are trying to get a job and to get vocational training and struggling financially?
Yeah, I think that grants, I mean, we talk about loans, but I think grants are the way to go. There is a cyclical nature to a lot of the construction work. Project-based work is, I want to say feast or famine, but it's not, famine all the time. It's just, there's an ebb and flow. And so what I've heard, I have a lot of friends who are trades professionals, even during their apprenticeships, they had done their first period of school or the training, they'd gotten into their apprenticeship, then they had to go off to go to school. It took, in some cases, up to a month and a half to get EI. Well, on apprenticeship rates, they're not making a huge amount of money. If they're living with their family, it might, help, but they still probably have some payments to make. If they are single parents, you cannot go without a paycheck or without any income for 6-8 weeks. And so I think that's where the grants really come in.
Madame Gill, and now Mr. Reynolds for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for coming today. My question is for Ms. Ricketts. I'm actually a construction electrician myself. So I've been through the apprenticeship program and everything. What do you see is the single biggest barrier preventing our youth from entering into the trades?
Opportunity.
Yeah.
Finance is an opportunity, and you can expose the youth to the opportunities. If they don't know how to access them, might not be jobs available. Even if they do start an apprenticeship, it's being able to finish that apprenticeship all the way through. And so I think that it's not only just attracting them in, because we did increase the number of apprentices who registered, it's completion rates. And in 2022, completion rates for apprentices for men, in the 15 red seal trades, it was 46%. So 54% of people who registered for the trades dropped out of it.
Do you think that our slowing economy is affecting those completion rates?
I do, yeah. I think that we need to have the jobs, we need to have the projects, we know that. And I was really happy to see the government stimulate the economy with projects. But again, we're going to have to really look at incentivizing the employers to ensure that they are creating opportunity. And it comes down to clients as well. I actually saw this on the Dow project in Edmonton, ITC requirements. And so they actually do have to meet a minimum. There's a minimum number of apprentices that they have to hire on their projects. So they have to ensure contractors are hiring that number of apprentices.
So what do you think, other than the economy, of course, and having the projects, completion rates is still a problem in apprenticeship? Assuming that we have the jobs, we have the work, what can we do to improve apprenticeship completion rates?
I think it comes down to the finances, just ensuring that our apprentices have the money that allows them to be able to ebb and flow with the projects, ensuring that we're giving money to the schools so that we have enough seats open, so that we can get individuals into the technical training that they need to do.
So in your opening statement, you had talked about apprenticeship mobility and standardizing that federally. Obviously, apprenticeships are provincially managed. It is until you're a red seal that you have mobility. What do you think we could do to, that's a tough fight to have, you're fighting it out with each province, and the programs are so different from each province. What could we do federally to standardize apprenticeship and enable apprentice mobility federally, well, interprovincially?
Yeah, and I mean, we managed to do it with the Red Seal program, and I really do believe it's bringing those provincial bodies into a discussion and really looking at the technical training elements of each different apprenticeship, each level of apprenticeship, and saying, even right now between Alberta and BC, I can't take an Alberta apprentice pipe fitter and have them work in BC without going through the BC government, through BC Skilled Trades. I think that there needs to be a credential recognition. If somebody is a registered apprentice in a province and they are able to prove and show some of the skill set, i.e. a letter from an employer saying they'd have had, specific training, that it should be easily recognized in another province where they're going to be working.
Do you see an openness or a willingness from the provinces to look at that?
I mean, I haven't dealt with any of the provinces in the East or the Maritimes, but yes, in the West for sure. I sit in the board of directors with a few of the people from the different apprenticeship programs. And yes, there is definitely a willingness to look at recognition, credential recognition.
Yeah, I know if you're an apprentice in Ontario and you move to Manitoba, I'm from Manitoba, you move to Manitoba and you now have to deal with Apprenticeship Manitoba and try and transfer your schooling, your hours. It's very difficult. I think that there's a lot of room for improvement there. Have you spoken with any of provincial representatives from the respective apprenticeship branches and gotten feedback?
I sit in the board with Shelley Gray from Skilled Trades BC. We went through this issue because Kiewit itself has a couple of different projects in those provinces between Alberta and BC. And for her, it was, okay, let's work together so we can solve this issue. I think they would be willing to look at the issue and try to solve. Again, it comes down to ensuring that the credentials, the technical training is similar.
Thank you.
Monsieur Joseph, pour 5 minutes.
5 minutes, Mr. Joseph. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And yes, hello, Ms. Gassesi. And I'd like to congratulate you on the fight you're waging on behalf of youth. I know it's not an easy one, but let me reassure you that it is an entirely legitimate fight. What do employers need to do, concretely speaking, in collaboration with grassroots community organizations such as yours to no longer perpetuate systemic inequalities in access to employment for young black men and women? I'll give you a moment to respond.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I think that we have a lot of examples of this. If we look at our partners, Zurich Insurance, they identified a labor gap in their organization. They came to us and they said that they wanted to see more insurance underwriters. They helped us build the curriculum. They helped us to deliver the curriculum to the young people through their employee engagement, and that allowed for familiarity to be there. And then at the end, they hired the entire cohort. They built the program with us so that they can create a pipeline. Not only did they help us create that pipeline, they also brought other insurance companies such as Marsh Insurance alongside to also become employer partners. So I think that there's a lot of power that corporations have in ensuring that this happens. This also is beneficial to the employers. The employers are able to, number one, get to know the young people before they enter into their workforce. They're able to make our curriculum and our experience as realistic as possible for when they actually end up in their workplace. And I also think that instead of just hiring someone off of Indeed or LinkedIn, you actually have time to spend with someone and really understand them and know exactly the skills that they're going to have coming into the organization because you've helped to foster that development and help them build those skills. So from a corporation's perspective, there's a lot of things that can be done, but I think it needs to come outside of just the will of organizations knowing that they need to, that they want to reach a broader demographic of Canadians and that this is an untapped pool. There needs to be incentives. There needs to be some pushing of government to also initiate those relationships as well.
Merci. Je vais commencer.
Thank you. Another question. One again for you, Ms. Giussesse. The government has put in place a number of initiatives that you've had the opportunity to take advantage of for the benefit of youth. Now, among those federal initiatives that you've engaged in, which ones have had the most concrete impact on the youth that you support? And could you please share an example or a concrete story of a young person who has benefited from a federal program and that kind of support?
Oh, yes, for sure I can do that. I have many, but I would definitely say right now YESS is one of the programs that the federal government is providing that really speaks to the demographic that we serve and really focused on the wraparound supports that are necessary, the life stabilization that's necessary for a young person, and allows us to, as an organization, also to the flexibility to really understand where the funds should go based off of the young person's need. Because again, not every young person is the same. There's not like a magic, formula as to how we're going to serve Black youth specifically. It takes intentionality and an individual approach to each young person that walks through our doors. So I think YESS is a perfect example of something that was developed, and C was part of the development of that. Or shaping of that. I think that's a perfect example of a program that has worked. I've worked with many young people who have benefited from that, but I do have one individual who was furthest from the labor market, was very, for lack of a better term, making money on the Black market, was involved in it, had come out of incarceration, had ended up going and making a decision that he wanted to change his life. And the life stabilization supports that C had provided really helped him with that, because for many of the young people, particularly ones who might have been in contact with the law or might have been incarcerated, when they come back out, they're coming back to the same communities that maybe the friends or those folks might have put them in that same situation. And so part of the wraparound supports that were provided was a safety plan for this young person. When you're telling friends that you used to, roll with, that you don't want to be their friend anymore, you don't want to engage in what they're doing, that also puts a target on your back as well. So we were able to put a safety plan in place for this young man. He went from, at the beginning of...
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Ms. Gill for 2.5 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I also had a question to ask of Mr. Hirsch, who earlier alluded to something that we spoke about in the first panel, i.e. youth's expectations. I know we didn't really delve into that, but I imagine it's youth's expectations vis-a-vis jobs. So what are your thoughts and input on that topic, please?
Okay, well, a little bit of complacency is a theme that we've seen over the years, and that things are just going to magically land in people's laps. Anybody that's in this room has probably been in the same boat as me and everybody else, that there's no magical thing that's going to happen. Not sure where this whole thing emanates from, but you have to start at the bottom. I worked at a couple of fast food restaurants when I was 15 years old to start with, and I'm sure other people can attest to similar experiences. So there's got to be a bit of a change in the attitudes and philosophy of youth. And there's other factors too, about reliability, turnover, productivity. They're complex things. Nobody can come up with, a single statement and a single solution at this point. It's a difficult thing, but we definitely see that as a problem, that expectations are, not quite sure how to put this in a politically correct way, but it's got to be a change from the youth, that they do have to start at the bottom. But I guess there's got to be incentive too, right? So, like Ms. Ricketts has pointed out with the trades industries, and we can also attest to, how do we incent people to want to do those things, right? Right? The youth are a little bit confused and clouded in their viewpoints. I'll leave it at that.
No? Well, merci, Madame Gill.
Thank you, Ms. Gill.
Conclude the second hour of the witness testimony on this important study. I would like to thank the witnesses for appearing and sharing their information this afternoon. To the committee, thank you. And with that, is it the will of the committee to adjourn? Adjourn.